Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on essays on the Gita with our beloved Ranga. And we are on page 84, beginning with the sentence, "Twofold," says Krishna.
Yeah. Twofold, says Krishna, is the self-application of the soul by which it enters into the Brahmic condition. That of the Sankhyas by the yoga of knowledge, that of the yogins by the yoga of works. This identification of Sankhya with Jnana Yoga and of yoga with the way of works is interesting, for it shows that quite a different order of ideas prevailed at that time from those we now possess as a result of the great Vedantic development of Indian thought, subsequent evidently to the composition of the Gita, by which the other Vedic philosophies fell into desuetude as practical methods of liberation. To justify the language of the Gita, we must suppose that at that time it was the Sankhya method which was very commonly adopted by those who followed the path of knowledge. Subsequently, with the spread of Buddhism, the Sankhya method of knowledge must have been much overshadowed by the Buddhistic. Buddhism, like the Sankhya, non-theistic and anti-monistic, laid stress on the impermanence of the results of the cosmic energy, which it presented not as Prakriti but as karma, because the Buddhists admitted neither the Vedantic Brahman nor the inactive soul of the Sankhyas, and it made the recognition of this impermanence by the discriminating mind its means of liberation. When the reaction against Buddhism arrived, it took up not the old Sankhya notion, but the Vedantic form popularized by Shankara, who replaced the Buddhistic impermanence by the cognate Vedantic idea of illusion, Maya, and the Buddhistic idea of non-being, indefinable nirvana, a negative absolute, by the opposite, yet cognate Vedantic idea of the indefinable being, Brahman, an ineffably positive absolute in which all feature and action and energy cease, because in that they never really existed and are mere illusions of the mind. It is the method of Shankara, based upon these concepts of his philosophy. It is the renunciation of life as an illusion of which we ordinarily think when we speak now of the yoga of knowledge. But in the time of the Gita, Maya was evidently not yet quite the master word of the Vedantic philosophy, nor had it, at least with any decisive clearness, the connotation which Shankara brought out of it with such a luminous force and distinctness. For in the Gita, there is little talk of Maya and much of Prakriti, and even the former word is used as little more than an equivalent of the latter, but only in its inferior status. It is the lower Prakriti of the three gunas, Traigunyamai Maya. Prakriti, not elusive Maya, is in the teaching of the Gita the effective cause of cosmic existence. So, Srebdo is explaining many things in the background because of the confusion of the words Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. This is a chapter dealing with these things. He is defining what it is today and what it was at the time of the Gita. Okay, so twofold, says Krishna, is the self-application of the soul by which it enters into the Brahmic condition, that of the Sankhyas by the yoga of knowledge, that of the yogins by the yoga of works. So, let's have a look at what he's saying. Okay, the self-application of the soul, twofold. The way to reach the Brahmic condition is in two ways. One is by silencing the mind. That's the way of the Sankhya. And at that time it was equivalent to Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is the pursuit of the Brahmic consciousness by saying to oneself, I am not the body, I am not the body, I am not the vital, I am not the mind. Not orally, but you say to yourself and you try to distance yourself from your body, mind, life. That's it. And the Sankhya method is by also the Neti method. Na iti, na iti. I am not this, I am not this, I am not this. Incidentally, Sri Aurobindo prefers the other way. He says the negative way is okay. I am not the body, I am not the vital, I am not the mind. But why not make it positive? I am the pure soul. I am the pure soul. I am the self. Lean more towards the positive and not the negative. Sri Aurobindo says. Okay, that's his method. So Sri Aurobindo is saying that Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna there are two ways. One is by distancing yourself from the body, mind, life. And the other is, so when you distance yourself, you are not doing any work in the physical world. Work is discouraged in the Sankhya philosophy as well as the Jnana Yoga. Because if you do work, you are most likely, you are going to get attachment and you are going to get desires. If you remain in the world, there will be things which will attract you and you will have desires and there will be also attachment. So, better not to do any work in the physical world as far as possible. That's the Jnana Yoga method. But the other method, yoga of works, karma yoga. Do works, but don't do it for yourself. Do it for the Lord. So they are opposite methods. That's what he's explaining here. Okay, so they are opposite methods. So Arjuna is puzzled. And Shri Krishna tells him that they are essentially the same. The methods are different, but you arrive at the same result. There is no difference between them.
And what is the aspect of love and devotion?
It's not spoken of here at this level. It is spoken of much later. That is the Gita's speciality. In the Jnana Yoga, the question of love is not even arises. You just want to identify yourself with the Supreme. Yoga means identifying yourself with the Supreme.
I have one more. What about Nama Japa?
Nama Japa is a way, and that's a different yoga again, but it's nothing to do with the Jnana Yoga. That's another way. There are so many yogas also. No? Nama Japa is a very powerful method. Constant remembrance. So, in Sri Aurobindo Yoga also you have the remembrance. Remember the divine and offer. So, Nama Japa, doing the beads, these are all ways to focus the mind on something. So if you remember, you are focusing the mind. If you do Nama Japa, you are focusing the mind, ultimately. And if you are also doing the beads, same thing. Although it may be done mechanically in the beginning, it has a value. Because ultimately it will become conscious. It may be unconscious, but it is. Yeah. Nama Japa is very interesting. I was given a book by my Sanskrit teacher with the 1,000 names of Vishnu. Vishnu Sahasranama. Okay? So you go on, and the mind dwells on that. And the more your mind is dwelling on it, a slow transformation comes. So, we get back to our text. This identification of Sankhya with Jnana Yoga and of Yoga with the way of works is interesting, he's saying. For it shows that quite a different order of ideas prevailed at that time from those we now possess as a result of the great Vedantic development. Okay? Vedanta is again the reintroduction of the Upanishads and the Vedic methods. It was overshadowed after the Vedic period. It got overshadowed completely due to several reasons. One of the reasons is the introduction of Buddhism in the 500 BC. Buddhism became a very powerful force. And Buddhism was concentrating on the solution to the problem of suffering. So they said, and when you go to the Brahmic consciousness, you see the physical world as unreal, illusion. So slowly the Vedic concepts of everything being the divine, okay, heaven is my father and the earth is my mother. That was the Vedic idea. Everything is real. That got overshadowed. And then the Muslim invasion of India, and then the English invasion of India, and Buddhism. The world is unreal. Don't bother about it. So there's a huge fall, and there was no importance was given to the physical world. That's for 300, 400 years. Okay, there was complete destruction of the Sanatana Dharma, the way of life in India. By the way, there is no such thing as Hinduism. Huh? Hinduism is a word which is coined by the West. Sindhu is a river which is coming down from the Himalayas, and those people who used to come from the West, Mesopotamia and Egypt and all, there's a lot of people used to come. So the idea was those who live on that side of the Sindhu river are the Hindus. So actually there is no such thing as Hinduism. There is Vaishnavism, there is Shaivism, there is Jainism, all these religions, Sikhism, all these religions are, but there is no Hinduism. Hindu is not a religion at all. What is common to all these is the Hindu way of life. So the Hinduism, the word has been introduced by the West. There is no such thing as Hinduism. So Srindra is saying that Sankhya was identified with Jnana Yoga, which is the way of knowledge. And the yoga was identified with the Karma Yoga. Whereas actually yoga is not Karma Yoga. Yoga is the Patanjali system, the Eightfold Path. Okay. So Srindra is saying that at that time, the ideas were quite different. Okay. So, for it shows that quite a different order of ideas prevailed at that time from those we now possess as a result of the great Vedantic development of Indian thought, subsequent evidently to the composition of the Gita, by which the other Vedic philosophies fell into disuse, okay, as practical methods of liberation. So, and what are these Vedic philosophies? There were many, okay. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, the yoga system of Patanjali, Sankhya, these are all the philosophies. But they sort of went into the background. They all had philosophical aspects and practical yogic aspects. But they were all there, and only three things became very prominent. One was the yoga system of Patanjali, Raj Yoga, and the Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. These were the developments in modern India, these were the ones that were prevalent. Okay, so to justify the language of the Gita, we must suppose that at that time it was the Sankhya method which was very commonly adopted by those who followed the path of knowledge. Jnana Yoga was at that time not so. Patanjali's yoga also was not there. Okay, so.
And we had a footnote.
Pardon?
A footnote.
Yeah, the footnote is the systems of the Puranas and the Tantras are full of the ideas of the Sankhya, though subordinated to the Vedantic idea and mingled with many others. There was a lot of interaction, and the Puranas also had a lot of these ideas, and Tantra also full of the ideas of Sankhya. Sankhya, the main contribution of Sankhya is the concept of Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and force. Chit, Shakti. Chit is consciousness, force is Shakti. And they are quite different, they are separate. They may be at the highest level, they are one in other yogas, but not in Sankhya. In Sankhya, they are always separate because they don't go high enough. Sankhya stops at the spiritual planes of consciousness. So Subsequently, with the spread of Buddhism, the Sankhya method of knowledge must have been much overshadowed by the Buddhistic. Buddhism, like the Sankhya, non-theistic and anti-monistic. So, non-theistic means theism means the system of belief that believes in a personal God.
Personal God, yes.
That God has a person and a form. Okay, he can take a form. And anti-monistic. Anti-monistic because Sankhya says the ultimate reality is twofold. Purusha, Prakriti. Consciousness and force. Whereas the Vedantic method is not dualistic at all. It's single, monistic. So there is a big difference between Vedanta and Sankhya. Sankhya says the ultimate reality is twofold. Consciousness and force. And when they combine, then there is creation.
And Mother and Sri Aurobindo have brought us to monism.
Yes. There is a lot of truth in what they say. So Sri Aurobindo does not reject the Sankhya philosophy, but doesn't go far enough. Purusha Prakriti concept is correct. But if it goes beyond a certain level, Purusha and Prakriti become one. Chit Shakti becomes one. They are indistinguishable. So the Buddhism, like the Sankhya, non-theistic and anti-monistic, laid stress on the impermanence of the results of cosmic energy. So, impermanence. The idea was that there is a Purusha which is static and immobile and only has consciousness but no action. It just looks. Witness self is just watching everything. But the Prakriti is the one that creates, is moving. And in the physical world, there is constant action, constant movement. There is no stability. So one is silence and one is activity. Purusha is silence and Prakriti is activity. So this was stressed at that time. So that's what he's saying. Okay. So the impermanence of the results of the cosmic energy. Cosmic energy is Prakriti. Prakriti is force. In the physical world, you have force. But everything in the physical world is impermanent. Nothing lasts. It is created and disappears. The world is permanent, but the forms in the world are impermanent.
So how did Buddhism arrive at that impermanence?
Because when they go to the spiritual plane of consciousness, you enter into a consciousness which is permanent but non-moving. It is immutable. And you see from that mountaintop that the world is moving, all that constant movement is there. Forms are being born, forms are dying. Forms are being born, forms are dying. Whereas this is a static condition. The nirvana consciousness is static. There is no movement there. So they arrived at the impermanence of the physical world. Results of the cosmic energy. But which presented it not as Prakriti, but as karma. Okay? Now Buddhism doesn't subscribe to this consciousness and force. They say that it is the result of your karma. They introduce the idea of karma. What you are doing today will affect you tomorrow. So the idea of karma is very prevalent in Buddhism, but not Purusha Prakriti. Okay? So, because but as karma, because the Buddhists admitted neither the Vedantic Brahman nor the inactive soul of the Sankhya's. That's why it is a unvedic, almost anti-Vedic religion, Buddhism. There is no God. They don't believe in God at all because there is no formless. Only in the condition of the Brahmic consciousness, where you are in a consciousness which is static, immutable, infinite, eternal, featureless.
And Krishnamurti?
And
Krishnamurti?
He says the same thing.
Same thing.
He also says that there is no God. Okay? God is personal form of God. But this is an impersonal form of God. But they don't use the word God. So, The Buddhists admitted neither the Veda nor the active soul. So for Buddhism, there is no God and the world is shunyam, nihil. There is nothing. Okay. Actually, it's not Buddha who said that, but Buddhism in the later. Buddha never said that. He refused to discuss philosophy because he said that will confuse you and it will give wrong ideas. So he never wanted to discuss philosophy.
But I heard that beautiful story that when he was leaving, he turned back and looked at the earth with compassion.
Yeah. That's the Bodhisattva, the one who, the Amitabha Buddha. That's a story because of his compassion for suffering mankind. So the story goes like that he says that I will not go into nirvana until every soul on earth is liberated. But that can never be because in time it will go on, go on, go on. So it's a story which illustrates his compassion for the world. That's what it means. Okay. They are more concerned with the suffering humanity than by their own liberation. Sri Aurobindo mentions that. Vivekananda, the same thing. Sri Aurobindo also the same thing. They are interested more in the redemption of the suffering humanity. So, when the reaction against Buddhism arrived, it took up not the old Sankhya notion, but the Vedantic form popularized by Shankara, who replaced the Buddhistic impermanence by the cognate Vedantic idea of illusion, Maya. So, Buddhism, 500 BC. Shankara, 8th century AD. That means 1500 years before our time. 8th century AD. And he took up the same idea, but he reintroduced Vedanta. But he brought in the idea of Maya and give it a different meaning. Okay. So, in the Gita, there is not much talk of Maya, as he says afterwards. There is only talk of Prakriti. Okay.
Was there ever any, in those years, that 8th century AD, any discussion about Christ?
I don't think that
so
Christ
it was purely more a Western.
Yeah, it's only after the European invasion in India that the Christian missionaries came, and then Christianity was introduced. Before that, there was no Christianity. There is a story that Christ, for some years, there is a gap in his life, and they say that he came to India.
In Kerala.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is this story is there.
Yeah.
So anyway, because the Buddhists admitted neither the Vedantic Brahman or the inactive soul of the Sankhya. And it made the recognition of the impermanence by the discriminating mind its means of liberation. So the physical world is impermanent. Don't pay any attention to that. Concentrate and go to the higher level of consciousness. And how do they do that? The Buddhism is the eightfold path. Right thinking, right living, and right discrimination, all there are eightfold path it's called. So, when the reaction against Buddhism arrived, it took up the Sankhya notion of Vedantic form popularized by Shankara, who replaced the Vedantic impermanence by the cognate Vedantic idea of illusion, Maya, and the Buddhistic idea of non-being, indefinable nirvana, by a negative absolute, by the opposite and yet cognate Vedantic idea of the indefinable being, Brahman, an ineffably positive absolute in which all feature and action and energy cease, because in that they never really existed and are mere illusions of the mind. So, Buddhism, the world is unreal. Shankara replaced it with another idea. He says that the world is not unreal, it is real in time and space, impermanence. It's time and space. But if you want to find the divine, you have to go outside the universe. Now Sri Aurobindo comes and says that you can find the divine even in the cosmos. So that's the thing. So the word Maya, he was given a different. The meaning of Maya is threefold. Maya means the power of creating forms. The original meaning of Maya is the power to create forms. But when you create the forms and you experience them as unreal, the secondary meaning of Maya comes in. You have the power to create illusions. That is lower Maya. There is a higher Maya and a lower Maya. The higher Maya is the original meaning of Maya. But when Shankara came in, he gave the idea of the illusion, the creation of illusions. Okay. So Mayavada was introduced, but Shankara never said the physical world is unreal. He was misinterpreted. Okay, so in a family in which feature and action sees energy, that they never really existed. It is the method of Shankara, based upon these concepts of his philosophy. It is a renunciation of life as an illusion of which we ordinarily think of when we speak now of the yoga of knowledge. Yoga of knowledge is Jnana Yoga, and that at that time it was the Sankhya philosophy. So don't worry about the physical world, don't do any action, just concentrate and go to the higher level of consciousness, the spiritual planes of consciousness. But in the time of the Gita, Maya was evidently not yet quite the master word of the Vedantic philosophy. Okay? The Vedantic philosophy, the sense of illusion was not there at the time of Gita. It came later on with Shankara. Okay? The misapplication of his philosophy was evidently not quite the master word of the Vedantic philosophy, nor had it, at least in any decisive clearness, the connotation which Shankara brought out of it with such a luminous force and distinction. So he is giving very high praise to Shankara.
Very much.
In fact, he says, Sri Aurobindo says, the greatest minds the world has produced are Plato and Shankara.
Ah,
It has unbelievable sharpness of intellect. So, for in the Gita, there is little talk of Maya, but much of Prakriti. Prakriti is nature, and nature is exactly in the physical world, the first level. And so you are using a different word and saying not illusion, but Prakriti, nature, constant movement, non-stop movement. Okay? And even the former word is used as little more than an equivalent of the latter. The former is Maya, okay? But only in its inferior status. In the Gita, it is used in the inferior status, but there is not much mention of Maya. There is mention of Prakriti, which is basically the same thing. So, it is the lower Prakriti of the three gunas, Traigunyamai Maya. So, there you are. It is used in a negative sense, Maya. But originally it didn't mean illusion at all. The original meaning was not that. But later on it became Traigunyamai Triguna. That means this Sankhya method of the Sankhya philosophy of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So you have to go beyond Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Sattva belongs to the mind, illumination. Rajas belongs to the vital, the power of action and force. And Tamas belongs to the body, the associated, not belonging, associated with the body, the principle of darkness and stability and non-movement. So you have to go beyond these three. In other words, you have to lose your identification with your body, life and mind. Then only you can get to the Brahmic consciousness.
now Mother must have shaken up things when she said so much work had to be done. We had to work, action,
Yes,
and she started all these groups.
yes.
Was there resistance in the beginning?
Not in the ashram, no.
Not in the ashram.
No. In fact, the revival started in India. Afterwards, the idea of the world is illusion is not common now. It's not common now. But for a long time it was after Shankara. But he was misinterpreted, as I've said. His philosophy is very complex. And Maya is being interpreted as illusion. But illusion in Shankara is not that the world is false. It is that you are seeing it in the wrong way. There is a reality, but you are not seeing it in the right way because of your defective instruments of knowledge. That's what is meant. It is the lower Prakriti of the three gunas, Traigunya Mahimaya. Prakriti not illusive Maya, is in the teaching of the Gita the effective cause of cosmic existence. Cosmic existence is created by Prakriti, but not by Maya. Okay. Yeah, we can read the next one. Okay. Still, whatever the precise distinctions of their metaphysical ideas, the practical differences between the Sankhya and Yoga as developed by the Gita is the same as that which now exists between Vedantic yogas of knowledge and of works, and the practical results of the differences are also the same. The Sankhya proceeded, like the Vedantic yoga of knowledge, by the buddhi, by the discriminating intelligence. Viveka and vichara, these are the two things used in the yoga of knowledge, jnana yoga. It arrived by reflective thought, vichara, okay, reflective thought, at right discrimination, viveka, of the true nature of the soul and of the imposition on it on the works of Prakriti through attachment and identification, just as the Vedantic method arrives by the same means at the right discrimination of the true nature of the self and of the imposition on it of cosmic appearances by mental illusion, which leads to egoistic identification and attachment. So, I'll read the whole para. In the Vedantic method, Maya ceases for the soul by its return to its true and eternal status as the one self, the Brahman, and the cosmic action disappears. In the Sankhya method, the working of the gunas falls to rest by the return of the soul to its true and eternal status as the inactive Purusha, and the cosmic action ends. The Brahman of the Mayavadins is silent, immutable, and inactive. So too is the Purusha of the Sankhya. Therefore, for both, ascetic renunciation of life and works is a necessary means of liberation. But for the yoga of the Gita, as for the Vedantic yoga of works, action is not only a preparation but itself the means of liberation. And it is the justice of this view which the Gita seeks to bring out with such an unceasing force and insistence. An insistence, unfortunately, which could not prevail in India against the tremendous tide of Buddhism, was lost afterwards in the intensity of ascetic illusionism and the fervor of world-shunning saints and devotees, and is only now beginning to exercise its real and salutary influence on the Indian mind. When he says now, he means 100 years ago, because he wrote this in 1914 to 1920, 16 years. In the area he wrote this. So, in other words, the idea of the illusion of the world started disappearing in India only 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Okay, so is now only beginning to exercise its real and salutary influence on the Indian mind. Renunciation is indispensable, but the true renunciation is the inner rejection of desire and egoism. Without that, the outer physical abandoning of works is a thing unreal and ineffective. With it, ceases even to be necessary, although it is not forbidden. Knowledge is essential. There is no higher force for liberation, but works with knowledge are also needed. By the union of knowledge and works, the soul dwells entirely in the Brahmic status, not only in repose and inactive calm, but in the very midst and stress and violence of action. Devotion is all important, but works with devotion are also important. By the union of knowledge, devotion, and works, the soul is taken up into the highest status of the Ishvara to dwell there in the Purushottama, who is master at once of the eternal spiritual calm and the eternal cosmic activity. This is the synthesis of the Gita. So the Gita synthesizes the Sankhya and Vedanta both by this idea. But the idea of devotion and love comes last afterwards. We start reading, we may not be able to finish. Okay, so he is explaining the differences very clearly between the the yoga of Karma Yoga and the Sankhya. How Sankhya proceeds and how Karma Yoga proceeds. So, still, whatever the precise distinctions of their metaphysical ideas, the practical difference between Sankhya, that is the Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, and yoga as developed by the Gita, is the same as that which now exists between Vedantic yogas of knowledge, this is the Raj Yoga, and of works, Karma Yoga. And the practical results of the difference are also the same. So, the Sankhya method, he is now describing the Sankhya method, proceeded by the Vedantic yoga of knowledge, okay, by the Buddhi, the mind, okay, by the discriminating intelligence. It arrived by reflective thought, vichara, reflective thought. What is right, what is the truth, and what is the falsehood? At right discrimination, viveka, of the true nature of the soul and of the imposition on it by the works of Prakriti. The human soul is dominated by the body, mind, life, and it forgets what it is and identifies itself with Prakriti, which is the body, mind, life. That's what that's ignorance.
The human soul or the psychic being?
These are distinctions which are different in the soul is a psychic being.
Okay.
But the soul in Sri Aurobindo's terminology
stays up there?
No, that's the self.
Oh, that's the self.
The soul is the divine presence in everything.
Okay.
But the soul is the divine presence which is sleeping. It's not active. It's there even in the stone. Okay? But slowly, because it is divine consciousness, it cannot remain imprisoned. So it graduates slowly and evolves. And evolves because then it can graduate into something which is of a higher order. An animal or an insect is of higher order than the stone. So the consciousness there migrates. And from there it migrates to other forms. Higher forms, higher form, higher forms. That's why in the spiritual evolution of the soul, it needs a biological evolution of forms also. The higher biological form, the more the consciousness can express itself. It can't express itself in a stone. It can express itself better in an insect, even better in a cat or a dog, even better in an animal. So there is a biological evolution, that's Randu's philosophy. And the spiritual evolution, they go side by side. Both are necessary. Okay, so the Sankhya proceeded by the Vedantic method of Viveka and Vichara, of the true nature of the soul and the imposition on it by the works of Prakriti. Prakriti overshadows the soul. Action overshadows the soul, and the soul thinks that it is Prakriti. The soul thinks that it is body, mind, life. That's our condition. We feel that this is me. We don't think that I am the soul, and body, mind, life are only temporary housing for me. We don't think of it that way. So, it arrived by reflective thought, vichara and viveka, the true nature of the soul and of the imposition on by the works of Prakriti. How? Through attachment and identification, just as the Vedantic method arrives at the same means, at the right discrimination and true nature of the self and of the imposition on it of cosmic appearances by mental illusion, which leads to egoistic identification and attachment. The soul forgets itself and thinks that it is the body, mind, life. That's what he's saying. It has to get back to its own by losing the identification with body, mind, life. The attachment has to go. In the Vedantic method, Maya ceases for the soul. These are all, the actual experience is the same, but the interpretation in the two is different, slightly different. So that's what he's saying here. In the Vedantic method, Maya ceases for the soul by its return to its true and eternal status as the self, the Brahman, and the cosmic action disappears. In the Vedantic method, Maya is the one that is the illusion. The illusion that you are body, mind, life. That ceases and it goes back to its real self, the soul, which is the Brahmic consciousness. I am the self, you realize, and the body, mind, life is something temporary here going on, and that's not me. The identification with body, mind, life ceases. Okay, that's what he's saying. In the Vedantic method, this one, and the cosmic action disappears. In the Sankhya method, the workings of the gunas falls to rest. The workings of the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. As I told you, you can think of it as the body, the vital, and the mind. They are going on working, but the soul thinks that I am thinking, I am emoting, and I am acting, because it is identifying with the body. That identification has to cease. Okay? The working of the gunas falls to rest by the return of the soul to its true and eternal status as the inactive Purusha, and the cosmic action ends. For the soul, there is no more cosmic action. The cosmic action continues there, but it's not the soul doing that anymore. The soul is not doing anything. It becomes a witness. Okay? The Brahman of the Mayavadins, now this is the other interpretation, what the Mayavadins say. The Brahman of the Mayavadins is silent, immutable, and inactive. So too is the Purusha of the Sankhya. Therefore, for both, ascetic renunciation of life and works is a necessary means of liberation. So in the Mayavadins and the Sankhya, the physical world has to be given up. You have to give up. Not in the Gita. In the Gita, no. Because it wants karma yoga also. You have to work in the physical world and do the works not for yourself, but for the divine. Sacrifice. Okay, so. But for the yoga of the Gita, so he is giving all the different interpretations. For the yoga of the Gita, as for the Vedantic yoga of works, karma yoga, action is not only a preparation, but in itself a means of liberation. You use your action and offer it to the divine. And don't do it for yourself. Do it as a sacrifice. In the Gita as well as karma yoga, both same. Gita adopts the karma yoga method. Okay? Action is not only a preparation itself, but itself a means of liberation. And it is the justice of this view which the Gita seeks to bring out with such an unceasing force and insistence. An insistence, unfortunately, which could not prevail in India against the tremendous tide of Buddhism. Okay. And there's a footnote there, I'll read that. At the same time, the Gita seems to have largely influenced Mahayanist Buddhism, and texts are taken bodily from it, from the Buddhistic scriptures. It may therefore have helped largely to turn Buddhism, originally a school of quietistic and illuminated ascetics, into that religion of meditative devotion and compassionate action which has so powerfully influenced Asian culture. Mahayana and Hinayana, they are the two branches of the Buddhism. Mahayana is the one that doesn't believe that the world is illusion. And they have like that compassion and they understand. Liberation is important, but the world is not is not illusion. The Hinayana, only liberation they want. That's the difference between the two. Okay. Hinayana still exists in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. All these areas, Hinayana is still there. The Mahayana was there in Tibet, in China and Japan and Korea. But now these countries have not so religious anymore. It is still living. Buddhism still lives. But more as a religion, not a spiritual passage. So, unfortunately, which could not prevail in India against the tremendous tide of Buddhism, was lost afterwards in the intensity of ascetic illusionism and fervor of world-shunning saints and devotees. Now, the rest, what he is describing is I'll make it short, is the Gita's synthesis. The Gita wants Jnana Yoga because you want knowledge. It wants Karma Yoga because it wants action in the physical world. And it also introduces Bhakti Yoga later on. And that is the synthesis which the Gita makes. So the Gita is synthesizing the supposedly two opposite methods of Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, or in other words, Sankhya and Yoga. So this is what this Gita is doing, synthesizing all. That's why Sri Aurobindo calls this in Gita a synthetic. Sankhya is not synthetic. It says that there are two, Purusha and Prakriti. Okay. The Vedic era was synthetic. The Sankhya, the Gita is synthetic. The Tantra is synthetic. Synthetic means it doesn't exclude anything. And Sri Aurobindo's yoga also is synthetic. These are the syntheses.
Namaste all. Remember, tomorrow is Savitri.